10 seconds. All right. Hello, and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about why our relationship with our caregivers is not our relationship with everybody else, and why this can actually be incredibly confusing, and how we can miss that we are living as though we are still in a relationship with our caregivers when we're trying to relate to everybody else and not notice, okay? Because, again, I know that I have been talking a lot in a lot of my videos about childhood trauma and about how we got here and about how so much of what we are living in our adult realities is tied to what we lived in our childhoods. And it can be a bit repetitive, and it can be a bit like, I've heard this all before, it's all my childhood, whatever. But I really want to talk about this today because I feel like so many of us still really believe and really feel like we've walked into our adulthoods with our self-sabotaging behavior, with our coping mechanisms, with our scapegoats, with our addictions, with our ways that we get into relationships with lovers, with friends, with coworkers, with bosses, and all of these things, and we're just feeling like, what's wrong with me that I keep messing up my life? And we can understand what we would want instead. We can understand the happy life what we would want. We can understand what we would like to create instead, we think. We can understand the healthy relationships we wish we could have and the healthy ways of relating to the world we wish we could have. And then we just feel like we're failing, and we feel like there's something wrong with us, and we feel like, again, like we just walked into our adulthoods and decided to not support ourselves and not love ourselves and not treat ourselves with respect, and to develop all these negative habits and these coping mechanisms, these self-sabotaging behaviors and all these things. And if we could just get rid of them, we'd be happy and life would be awesome, and that these things are our problems, right? Our addictive behaviors are our problems, our coping mechanisms are our problems, our self-sabotaging behaviors are our problem, the way that we keep choosing the wrong relationship over and over and over again is our problem. And if we could just stop that, if we could just get rid of that, if we could just not have that thing anymore, we would be happy, right? And this is the narrative that so much spirituality talks about, that a lot of self-help and self-improvement talks about. Even the self-love movement talks about this a lot, that it's just, you just need to change your mindset, you just need to change your behavior, you just need to discipline yourself, you just need to realize that what you're doing isn't working and then stop that. And I know not everyone talks like that. I know a lot of people are starting to really get onto this idea that we've been traumatized and that we were conditioned and that all of these things happened. But I still think that a lot of us end up feeling shameful, and we feel guilty, and we feel like we're broken and we're bad and we've done something wrong when we look at our behaviors and our habits and our things that in our lives that are painful. Because, again, we're not acknowledging where our patterns came from. We're not acknowledging that we did not just wake up one day and decide we were going to be self-sabotaging, and decide we were going to be addicted, and decide we were going to continually choose the wrong relationship. This never happened. We are doing the best we can with how our nervous systems were programmed, okay? And unless and until we start to have really deep compassion for that, we're not going to be able to change our patterns. We're not going to be able to really, truly make permanent shifts in the way that we are. Like, some people, I think, can get really, really good at white knuckling and at just disciplining themselves to be different, but there's still an underlying intense energy that needs to be exerted to override what our nervous system wants us to do when we haven't done reprogramming and repatterning and found a new way that actually works better and taken our nervous systems with us. Okay, so the first thing, again, that I want to say before I totally get into this is I am not a psychologist. I am not a mental health professional. This is not meant to be in replacement for therapy or a replacement for speaking with a professional or interacting with professionals' work. if that calls to you and if that resonates for you. I am a person, I am a lay person who's just done a lot of research and seen a lot of things, and this is how I'm putting things together based on my experience and based on the things that I've been through and some of the things that I've read and just a lot of the stuff that I've observed in people over the years of being a people watcher, okay? So please don't defer to me over experts or to defer to me over your own experience. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't, okay? And then the second thing that I want to give before I even start is that there are some resources that if this work really, if this talk really resonates with you and you want to go deeper with it, I know that there's a man called Gabor Mate who has done a lot of research on especially addiction and how these things are rooted in our childhoods and our childhood trauma. And so you can look into his work. I also really like the book Complex PTSD by Pete Walker and Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And I'll put the links, as in I'll put the names of these things in the description of this wherever you're watching it later. But just to know that there are people out there who are doing research on this and that I'm definitely not the only resource. And so like I haven't really listened to a lot of Gabor Mate's work myself. I haven't read anything that he's written, but I have heard from people that he has a lot of really good information on this. And I have read Complex PTSD and Drama of the Gifted Child, and I think that they're really helpful resources for anybody. Even if you don't feel like you're traumatized or like you got traumatized or like you have PTSD, it can be just really helpful information about like how we're programmed, okay? So that's that before we get started. And the next thing that I just want to say is that, again, so much of this is going to be really, really hard to fully grasp, and we're going to spend a lot of time in our lives unpacking this stuff because it's so hard to understand how our minds were programmed and how our bodies were programmed, because the thing that we're using to try to disassemble and dissect and observe our programming is the thing that has been programmed. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. Really coming to see our programming, so what we were trained to believe about reality and about ourselves, starting to see that and how it may conflict with how real reality works, with what we're actually experiencing, with what we're actually going through, with the actual results we're getting, and how our conditioning might not be in alignment with how real reality is incredibly difficult, because the tool we're using to try to become aware of our programming, the tool we're using to try to understand what does and doesn't work and what was and wasn't correct in what we were programmed, the tool we're using to figure that out is the thing that has been programmed. So it can, like I say, we need to be incredibly patient with ourselves. And there are going to be many, many, many times on this journey of understanding our programming and understanding why we believe the things we believe and why we behave the way we behave, where we're like, oh my gosh, like I've literally been staring this in the face for like 10 years and didn't see it till now. There are going to be things that, as we're on this path, we become aware of, and then all of a sudden it's like so obvious that that thing was there the whole time, and yet to us it was just not a thing we were going to question because it was just so obvious to us. So the main thing is to please have lots of compassion for yourself and patience with yourself when you're looking at your pain and your self-sabotage and your addictions and your coping mechanisms and all these things you think are wrong with you, and understanding that the shame and the guilt and the blame and that this is your fault and that this is something wrong with you and you just need to fix this about yourself and all that stuff, those stories are going to be very strong, and those stories are going to appear to be correct to you. They are going to feel correct in the sense that they are going to feel very familiar. You're going to have a lot of stories to back up how those shame and guilt and I just suck and I just stepped into my adulthood and decided to fuck myself over and I just need to change this and this is all my fault You're going to have all those stories because, again, that's your programming, and that's how you survived your childhood. That's how you survived getting yourself to be what you have been programmed to be, even though in real reality, probably a lot of what you were programmed to be and programmed not to be hurt. Okay? Shame and guilt and blaming ourselves and not seeing where our patterns came from, just really, because again, this is the big thing, right? The thing that was programmed is the thing we're trying to use to discover our programs. It's very meta. It's very, very confusing. And what we were programmed to believe about ourselves, what we were programmed to believe about the world, what we were programmed to believe, and what we were shown, what we experienced. So again, it's not even just like these things are just beliefs that we have. We experienced that this was how life worked in our childhoods when we were being trained for this is how life works in general. Yes? What we were trained in our childhoods to be like how our childhood homes functioned, how we got love, how we got attention, how we got our needs met, what was okay, what was not okay, what was shamed, what was abandoned, what was celebrated, what was accepted. This is the program we got for this is how life works. You have to be this way. This is how we get our needs met. This is what everyone thinks. This is how everyone feels. Okay? That experience in our childhood, we are going to project that onto the greater reality because to us, our childhood was reality. Our household was reality. There weren't other people who believed other things that we were going to eventually be able to step into and then have that totally other experience and it was going to be great. We didn't know that. Okay? So again, these stories of it's all my fault and I'm just doing something wrong and I am shameful and I am guilty and I am broken and I should be able to be better and I just can't be and it's because I suck. These stories are going to feel very familiar and they're going to feel very obvious to us, not because they are true. Because again, I'm going to challenge any of us that when we think those thoughts, when we really think those thoughts and we sink into the actual sensation we feel in our bodies, okay? Because again, a lot of us think it feels true. That's when I think this terrible thought, I am shitty, I am broken, I should just be over this by now. I should be able to figure this out. I should know better. I should be able to do better. A lot of people say, no, that does feel true. You're telling me that if it's wrong, it will feel wrong, but it doesn't feel wrong. And I'm going to say, okay, does it feel true in the sense that it makes you feel light? It makes you feel free. It makes you feel sensations of opening and expansion, like your body feels light. That's how it feels? Or when you think those thoughts and you sink into your actual body and your physical sensation, does it feel like heavy? Does it feel contracting? Does it feel anxiety, right? Does it feel like that nervous energy? So not a clean burning energy of like enthusiasm, but of like adrenaline and fear. That is your body telling you that belief isn't true. So it might feel familiar. It might feel comfortable in the sense that you felt that before. It might make sense to you based on how you have been navigating your life up till now. But if it doesn't feel like lightness, and if it doesn't feel like freedom, and if it's not leading you to be able to figure something else out, to be able to make your life objectively better for yourself on a long-term basis, it's not reality. Okay? So the very first program most of us are going to start to face here is that feeling of familiarity, that feeling of the shame, the guilt, the this is my fault, the I am hopeless, the I can't figure this out, the adrenaline feeling, the heavy feeling, the crushing feeling, the worse it feels, the more true it is feeling. Being something we learned means that it's true. That's going to be the first program we have to start to pick apart. When something feels like that, when something feels heavy, when something feels contracting, when something feels like adrenaline running through your body, when something feels disempowering, when something feels like, again, the solution is to fix yourself and to just change and to stop being this way, that's how you know it's not true. And it's going to be something, for most of us, that we've believed our whole lives. And that we've been told our whole lives, this is how reality is. And so where did those beliefs come from? Why do we have beliefs about ourselves and about reality that feel terrible and that objectively keep us trapped in loops of doing the same thing over and over and over again? Because again, remember, when we're in that feeling state, that heavy, contracted, weighed down, blaming ourselves, shaming ourselves, guilting ourselves, there's going to be, again, a level of feeling like that's empowerment. There's going to be a part of us that believes that that is the best thing, that that is what empowerment is, that this is how we're going to fix ourselves and protect ourselves and save ourselves. That's what that shame voice and the guilt voice are doing. They are literally trying to prevent you from doing a thing that would be natural to you, or to get you to do a thing that doesn't feel good for you, based on your conditioning, based on who and what you had to be in order to survive in your childhood. And that's why we have that voice. So again, all of these teachings that tell us that the inner critic and the inner shame voice and that inner bully, or whatever we want to call it, is bad and wrong and we just have to stop listening to it. It's like, no, that voice is trying to protect you. And what it is trying to get you to do is live in alignment with your conditioning. Because again, in your childhood, anything that happened to you, anything your parents, your caregivers, the people who were in charge of you taught you, demonstrated to you, was the way you had to be in order to be loved and accepted by them. Became your blueprint for what was going to get you your needs met. Because in our childhoods, this is a super fundamental thing that we have to keep returning to over and over and over again. That in our childhoods, what got us accepted and approved of by our caregivers was the thing that to our nervous systems meant we were going to have provision and safety. Acceptance and love by our caregivers got programmed into our bodies as being the thing that keeps us safe and that gets us our needs met. Because we did not know how to understand our own needs. We did not know how to meet our own needs. We did not have agency. We did not have the capacity to figure out how reality worked. We did not have the capacity to understand ourselves. We did not have the capacity to even understand our caregivers and why that they were telling us the rules they were telling us and why they believed what they believed. We didn't have any of that information. All we knew was when mom and dad or caregivers pull away, I'm in danger. And when caregivers come close, I am safe. The second thing, the only thing we had control over was our behavior. The way we expressed, the way we didn't express, the way we cried out, the way we didn't cry out. Again, we did not have the capacity for the first several years of our life to say, my tummy hurts because I'm hungry, can you please feed me? We couldn't say that because we didn't know, right? All we knew was pain and pleasure. All we had any awareness of were the things that hurt and the things that felt good. And our caregivers were the arbiters, were the complete controllers of whether we got our needs met, whether pain went away, or pleasure was given. That was how we perceived it. So even though there may have been situations like when we were sick or when our caregivers simply didn't have the resources that we needed, or when we were in positions of pain and our caregivers couldn't rescue us, we still would have internalized that as we're doing something wrong and we're being abandoned, because to us, in our childhoods, our caregivers were God. They possessed absolutely everything. So if they weren't giving us something, if they weren't saving us from something, if they were leaving us in pain, we started from the very, very beginning making up stories about what we were doing to cause them to do that to us. We internalized it as us behaving wrong, doing something wrong, being the wrong way, and therefore being punished by them. When they gave us pleasure, when they met our needs, when they understood us, when they empathed us, when they did all that, that got programmed in as the behavior we have to exhibit in order to get our needs met. And I really want us to understand how incredibly impactful that is. Because now as an adult, how often do we walk around thinking everyone and everything is behaving some way because of us? Thinking we are being liked or disliked or blessed by the universe or whatever, not being given what we wanted, being punished because of our behavior, because of our thoughts, because of our vibration, because of the way that we have behaved or not behaved. Right? A lot of us still carry with us this same fundamental belief that there is a caregiver in the sky, that other people are our caregivers, and that everything we're experiencing is coming down to our behavior. Because that's how it was to us in our childhoods. Our behavior was the one thing that we perceived to be the thing that was causing everyone to react to us the way that they were reacting to us. So that's our second program. So the first program, again, if it feels terrible, the more familiar something feels, the more true that it is. That's the first program that we need to start to question. Anything that feels heavy, terrible, dense, or adrenaline in your body means that what you're believing and what you were trained to believe isn't in alignment with reality. Now, this doesn't always mean that the exact opposite is true. This doesn't mean that there aren't parts of what you believe that are true. It's to say that it's not the full truth and it's not allowing you to move forward. That's why it hurts. Just because it's familiar, just because you have a lot of stories and a lot of justifications and a lot of reasons for why you believe what you believe, and again, it may be based on your experience with other people and how people have treated you and all these things, it still doesn't mean that it's true in real reality if it hurts like that. Okay? And the second program is that our behavior is the way we get our needs met. That if we are getting what we want in life, or if we are being blessed, or if we're having success or whatever, it's all down to our behavior and the fact that we're doing something right. And if we are experiencing negative things and all of these things, that it is all down to our behavior and the fact that we're doing something wrong. Because that's what we believe to be true in our childhoods. That's what our little childhood minds came up with as a reason for why everything was happening the way that it was. We did not understand that our caregivers were separate people from us that may have been reacting to us for absolutely nothing to do with us. We didn't understand that our caregivers had limited resources. We didn't understand that our caregivers had programming of their own for how reality worked that may be incorrect, that they were projecting onto us. There were so many things going on during those first years of our lives that were so completely over our heads. We didn't see it, we didn't understand it, we didn't get that message. And we were making up stories and patterns and ideas about how reality worked and how we worked and what was right about us and what was wrong about us with so little information. And yet, most of us have never questioned those foundational stories ever since then. And now we live as adults with all of those stories, having never questioned them having only collected evidence, because then this is how our minds work, right? The next thing that we have to understand is that as we start to develop these belief systems, our minds, our programmed, our pattern recognition skill minds are going to go about looking for all the evidence to support that what we believe is true, and looking to filter out any evidence that contradicts what we believe is true. Because in order to feel safe in our environment, in order to feel safe in our world, in order to feel like we're not just constantly having an existential crisis where you got to lay on your bed and just like be overwhelmed, we need to feel like we have some understanding of how the reality works. We need to feel like what we believe to be true about the world is at least sort of true in order to be able to function. Yeah? And because the reality that we live in is so incredibly complex, there are so many factors that go into why things happen, that if we were really truly to be aware of all of that stuff all the time, we would be completely overwhelmed. So our minds, as genius as they are, for us, filter out anything that doesn't align with our belief system and overemphasizes the evidence for anything that does appear to align with our belief system in order to make us feel more secure in our beliefs, so that we can continue to operate as though what we know is true and stay in our kind of realm of safety where we know how to get our needs met to the degree we know how to get our needs met. So again, over this last 2 years, you may have noticed that you have tried to convince someone of something you believe that is opposing to what they believe, and it literally doesn't matter what evidence you give them for how their position is incorrect and your position is correct. They can twist what you've said to support their idea and to contradict yours, or they can find some way of just discrediting what you have to say. And you might have noticed that whenever anyone tries to convince you of something different than what you believe, you see evidence for how this supports what you believe already, and anything that doesn't, you can easily debunk. That's how our minds work. That's our cognitive bias. That again is our minds working to try to keep us safe by trying to keep us believing and feeling like we have the reality figured out, and therefore our actions are serving us properly. You see what I'm saying? So working with how our minds have been conditioned, working with how our bodies have been conditioned, is a big deal. So what most of us are doing in our adult life that we're probably not aware that we're doing to the degree that we're doing it is projecting our childhood circumstances onto the greater reality. We are holding on to the patterns that we learned, where this is how we get approval from caregivers, this is how we get rejected, this is what is okay, this is what's not okay, these are the parts of me that are good, these are the parts of me that are bad, these are the needs I'm allowed to have, these are the needs I have to get rid of. And we have taken all of this, where we were rejected and where we were accepted by our caregivers. And that, again, got programmed in as being how we were going to survive. Being who our caregivers, our programmers, wanted us to be. To our bodies and nervous systems at the time of childhood was existentially the most important thing. Not being what got them to reject us and abandon us and tell us we were wrong and bad. Existentially was something we felt like if we did, we were going to die. So now in our adulthood, and again, and then another big thing is that we never learned, most of us never got to make the transition from childhood reality, where we are fully codependent with our caregivers. So again, everyone out there who's like, why am I codependent? Why am I codependent? Why can't I just be okay with people not liking me? Why can't I just be myself even though people don't like it? Why do I feel afraid to express myself even when I'm just alone by myself? Why do I feel so afraid to express my needs? Why do I feel like I have to make myself wrong and hate myself and get rid of this part of myself if someone tells me that a need that I have or that I want that I have or a value that I have is wrong? Or they don't validate it, or they can't meet it? Why do I feel so desperate to be liked? Why do I feel like if I am rejected, I will die? Why do I feel like absolutely it will not be okay? Why do I feel like the God in the sky is completely looking at all of my behavior and judging me all the time? Why do I feel like I don't have autonomy? Why do I feel like everything that happens in my life is because of me? Well, you feel that way because in your childhood, from 0 to 7, especially, that's what they say, that's what Aristotle said, give me the child from 0 to 7, and I will give you the man, the woman, the person. Because when we were that young, we were in a codependent relationship. Relationships were fundamentally codependent, and they had to be. Our very first relationship program, please understand this, all of us, our very first relationship programs were codependent programs. We needed our caregivers to empath our needs because we could not explain them. We needed our caregivers to understand us because we could not understand ourselves. We needed our caregivers to meet our needs because we could not meet our needs on our own. We were fully dependent upon them. And because we are emotional beings with complex nervous systems, part of how our caregivers bond with us so that they will meet our needs is through the chemical concoction of love. Parents go through a huge hormonal shift when they have children. And I think that this happens when we adopt children. I really truly believe that that hormonal shift and all of these things happens when we take something on as being our own that we're going to care for. And that is what gets us, right? To wake up 400 times in the night to feed the child. To sacrifice our needs, to sacrifice our comfort, to sacrifice what we want in the moment for the child. To not drown the child when the child is crying for the 400th hour in a row. Generally, right? When things are going right. This overwhelming love that happens when a caregiver takes a child. Right? That bonding is what causes the caregiver to empath the needs of the child, to meet the needs of the child, to love the child for who the child is, and to have all of these things go on. And in a perfect world, in perfect reality, our caregivers would understand how reality worked perfectly. Our caregivers would fully understand and love us, and they would meet our needs the best that they could. And where they couldn't, they would be able to communicate with us that it's not because of us, that they're not just not meeting our needs because we're wrong and bad. We wouldn't be shamed, we wouldn't be blamed, we wouldn't be guilted. If we did things that were objectively harmful, if we were doing things that were objectively dangerous, they would help us learn from real reality, right? Like when we hit the other kid and we're going through that phase of I want something and this is childhood psychology development, I'm gonna become violent in order to get what I want. The caregiver wouldn't shame the child for that. It would say, okay, come look and see what it's like. How does it feel to look at this child that you just hurt? And we would learn viscerally, oh, that doesn't feel good. And then the parent would teach us what sharing looks like, and then would get us to feel what that feels like. And then we would say, well, that feels much better. And so we would learn deep down to do that rather than I have to do this, otherwise I'm going to be rejected and kicked out of the tribe. You see? And so in this perfect world, we wouldn't be in fight or flight. We would be in rest and digest, where we're feeling the things that we're going through, where we're going through our experiences, and our caregivers are slowly helping us understand how life works, how we work, so that by the time we get into adulthood, we have awareness of what our needs are. We have awareness of what we want and what we need. We have awareness of how to cooperate and communicate. We have awareness of the needs we can meet on our own. We have awareness of how we can work with other people to get our needs met. We have awareness of where our autonomy is, because this is the thing. As we grow and as we become more adult, we should be becoming more independent and less codependent and more interdependent, where we start to realize that we are always going to have to work in community with other people. We are not going to be independent. We don't fully meet our own needs all by ourselves. Nor do we stay in that codependent relationship where we are expecting to be empathed, where we are expecting that if we're being rejected, we have to change our behavior, right? So what actually happens for most of us is that we don't have that clean upbringing. Rather, we have caregivers that blame and shame and guilt and reject us, that are busy, that have their own stuff going on in their lives. Like, it's not always this overt abuse thing. It's not always overt shaming or blaming or guilting. Sometimes it really just is our parents don't have the resources to meet our needs, or they're too busy, or they get mad at us because they're overwhelmed, or whatever happens. And to understand, right, that in that, rather than us being able to say, it's okay, they're probably still going to meet my needs. It's okay, they're probably still going to feed me even though they're mad at me. It's okay, they believe what they believe about my expression or the way that I am or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's actually ultimately bad or ultimately not okay. I can still be this way, and there are other people out there who will like me for who I am. And there's a life that I can create for myself when I'm grown up that my caregivers don't understand and are telling me is wrong and bad and evil, that it's going to be perfectly great for me. We don't have any of that awareness, right? So when we are children, we are learning that we have to be the way that our caregivers want us to be. We have to avoid getting rejected by them. And rather than learning from real reality, okay, this is what is huge. We never learned how to learn from real reality because we were in a codependent relationship with our caregivers. What our caregivers accepted and said was good to us was reality. That is what we had to be, that is what we had to do in order to get our needs met. What our caregivers said was wrong and bad and what got us shamed and blamed and rejected to our nervous systems was, that is not okay, we cannot do that, if we do that, we're gonna die. So, if you being authentically something about yourself got you rejected by your caregivers, you are going to develop an existential fear around that part of yourself. Because in the codependent relationship you have with your caregivers, it was dangerous for you to be that way. If your caregivers wanted you to be something that wasn't you, if your caregivers wanted you to do something and programmed you that this is how you have to be and this is what you have to do in order to be good, that didn't align or feel good for you, your nervous system said, too bad, we have to do it. Because that's what gets me accepted. And acceptance is survival. So we learned deep in our programmed nervous systems from the very beginning that what gets us accepted is how we survive. That what gets us rejected is how we die. So we are not functioning off of true pain and true pleasure. We are not functioning off of true reality. What is real? What is actually beneficial? What is truly in alignment with how I work, with what works for me, with it, what is actual self-care and actual self-awareness. We're not operating from that. We're not operating from what actually works in real reality to create structures that work for all of us. We're not working from that reality. We are working from the reality of whatever gets me accepted is the right way, whatever gets me rejected is the wrong way, and whatever I got programmed to believe was right and wrong, whatever got me accepted or rejected in my early childhood is reality, is how everyone thinks, is how everyone feels. And then the stories we created around why that is. I got rejected because I'm annoying. I got rejected because my needs are too much. I got accepted because this thing that I did was the only way to be that's acceptable. We made up all these stories, which may or may not have even been why our caregivers were doing what they were doing. But we made up that story that that's what it was and that's why. And now we've been running with that assumption ever since. So yeah, Brandon says, yep, grew up in Utah with the Mormon religion. There's a reason we have the highest divorce and suicide rate. Because again, that is like such strong programming and conditioning of this is how you have to be. These are the right ways. This is the rules. And those things don't align with how most people are. And so we are constantly in this battle of fighting against ourselves, fighting against the things that actually feel terrible for us, but that we were programmed we had to do and be in order to survive, fighting against the things that actually feel good, do this or go to hell. Absolutely, right? Like this conditioning is so, we have to understand how just like life altering this is, right? When we're told straight up, you will burn in hell forever if you are this way. When we're children, we don't have the capacity to be like, no, I won't. What does that even mean? That's not good. We get triggered into fight and flight and we're like, holy shit, I'm going to die. This part of me is going to get me in eternal damnation. Right? Like the reason we have our scapegoats, our coping mechanisms, our numbing, our self-sabotaging, our addictions, the reason we can't ever seem to find a life that feels good for us, the reason we constantly have that voice in our head that tells us how horrible and bad and shameful and wrong we are, the reason we can't express our needs in our relationships, the reason we can't say and own who we are and be rejected and be okay, is because our nervous systems got programmed so early in our lives that this was what was survival and this is what was death. Okay? And if we can really understand that, again, your nervous system believes that for you to be different than how you are right now is to die. Because it got programmed that whatever it is that you're doing right now to survive your life, including your addictions, including your scapegoats, including your self-sabotage, this is how you know how to survive right now. This is what got programmed in. This is how you are stopping yourself from being your true self. Because your very first relationships, the thing you got taught about how life fundamentally works, is that you are in a codependent relationship with your caregivers, with the people around you, and that survival comes from being accepted and approved of. So Brandon says, I am an ex-addict and growing up here was a huge reason for that. I got baptized into the religion because when we moved here, only because I couldn't have friends, parents told the kids yeah, exactly, right? Like they were not to hang out with me because I wasn't Mormon. And to be rejected like that, it's going to be so painful. That's going to feel like you're going to die again, right? Like that's what your nervous system is going to think about that. And then to go with the tribe, to go with the group, to do the thing, is to reject and deny who and what you are. And that's going to feel painful all the time. So then again, now when we look out in our society and we are adults and we're like working and we're in relationships and we're doing all these things and we think like, I have a good life, what's wrong with me? Why do I have addictions? Why do I have self-sabotage? Why do I have coping? Why can't I get, he said 8 years old hearing that destroyed me, 100%. So like, why do I have all these behaviors? Why can't I be happy? Why can't I get my life together? Why am I so terrible and shitty and all of these things? You're not. It's what you were trained to do and be in this world. So now it's not just your caregivers, but how you were trained, what you were trained to value, what you were trained you had to do and be in order to fit in, what you were trained you had to do and be in order to be in a relationship with other people who all also were raised in codependent relationships where, again, we learned that approval and rejection is how we survive. We never learned the adult reality that understanding who and what we are, expressing that, learning how to get our needs met in a community where we compromise and learn from each other and do all of these things, we never learned any of that. All we know is that acceptance is how we survive. And culture is pretty fucked up. What we have to do to survive culture, to be accepted in culture, to fit in, for most of us, goes against our true survival needs, goes against who and what we actually are. And we don't recognize that, and we don't see that, because who and what we actually are and what we actually want to do and what we actually want to be, we see it as evil and wrong and bad because we were trained to see it that way. We're not seeing, oh, I don't like my job and I don't like my career because it's not who and what I am. It's not what I actually want to do. The reason I feel like I need to numb out every single night after work is because my job doesn't align with who I really am. We don't see that. We see, why can't I get my shit together at my job? Or I can get my shit together at my job, but and then I have to drink every night and I don't know what's wrong with me. And if we admit to ourselves we don't like our job, again, we think that we're doing something wrong. So Brandon said, self-awareness is the key to life. As a life to truly know and understand oneself is to truly know and understand everyone. I went to addiction therapy, but I truly think there should be an adult life therapy. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give you adult life therapy, which is all of these parts of yourself that you hate, all of these parts of yourself that you have shame and abandon, shame around, guilt around, all of these parts of yourself that can't do what you're supposed to do, or that in order to do what you're supposed to do, you then have coping, self-sabotage, addictions, scapegoats, all the parts of yourself that can't communicate in relationships, that literally feel like if people don't validate you and if people don't understand you and if they're not meeting your needs, there's something wrong with you and you need to change yourself. Or we just get super resentful and expect that people should meet our needs, right? And we can't ever get to a place where we can understand why someone is the way they are and why we are the way we are and what we need and how we can be okay with that, right? We just go codependent, I need to just change myself so that people will like me, or we try and be completely independent, and if someone rejects me or abandons me or whatever, I'm just going to put up that wall, I'm going to reject them, I'm going to get out, I don't need you, I'm just going to be completely on my own, and I'm not going to meet your needs and you're not going to meet mine kind of thing, because we never learned how to work in community. We never learned that if something feels like shit, no matter how logical it is to us, it isn't true in reality, right? We are still not living from true feeling. And again, so many of us who think we're living from our intuition and think we're living from our feeling and think we're tuning into our higher intelligence, emotional awareness, aren't. We're tuning into the programs we were given and what we feel about those programs. We're projecting our trauma from our childhoods out onto the media, out onto the government, out onto the people around us. And it feels real because, again, we're not noticing, okay, no, this feels familiar. This is the story that I told myself about what was going on in my childhood. These are the stories that where I felt like I was being suppressed or controlled or whatever. But it's not reality. My feelings aren't telling me what reality is. My feelings are telling me what reality is. This thought feels terrible. It's not true. But most of us don't even have that awareness yet. We just think, well, nope, this feels terrible, and that usually means that I'm right about this, so this thing is bad. Or this thing is good. Right? Like, a lot of people ask me, like, why do I keep getting in the same relationship over and over again? Because that's the relationship you're familiar with. That's the relationship your body learned was how you get your needs met. Like, a lot of us will be in codependent or abusive or imbalanced relationships that mirror the relationships we had with our caregivers, because that's familiar. We know how to behave in those relationships. We know how to be. We know what the pattern is. It might not be healthy. It might not feel good. It may not be comfortable in the sense that we like it. But it's what our nervous systems learned as being how we get our needs met. If we were to be with someone who doesn't fit the mold for how our caregivers worked, they might understand us and love us better. And we're going to feel totally weirded out by it because we don't know how to be in that relationship. We don't know how to get our needs met like that because we're not aware of our needs and we're not aware of our patterns, and all we know is that program. So this is the point of this. The first thing is that I really want you to understand that so much of what you're struggling with is not just because you made a bad decision in your adulthood and now just have these terrible patterns and this thing that's wrong with you. It's your conditioning. And the thing that you're using to deprogram yourself from your conditioning is the thing that's programmed and conditioned. So learning how to actually discern what we're feeling is the first step. Just because something feels familiar and just because you have stories to back it up doesn't mean it's true. When you're asking yourself, does this feel true? If it feels heavy, if it feels like contraction, if it feels like anxiety, it is not true. It might be familiar, and like I say, you might have a million stories to prove that it's true. And it may have been true in your childhood. But this does not mean it is true now, that it's real reality. And that is going to be an existential crisis. Every time we come up against a belief that we've been living with for our entire lives, no matter how freeing it might feel in the beginning to think, okay, that's not true, yay, we're going to be scared, because then that means we don't have a clear view of how reality works. And then we have to go into that unknown of figuring out what is true. And that's always going to be uncomfortable. So most of us will stay in our patterns and our conditioning for the rest of our lives, even though it feels like shit. Because at least it's familiar, and at least we know how to navigate the world where that's true. When we're truly questioning our beliefs to the degree that most of us need to be doing, we're going to be having existential crises often. We're going to be like, oh God, well, okay, then I don't know how to be. I don't know who to be. I don't know what's right. I don't know who I am. That's part of this. We have to learn to get okay with letting go of what we believe without knowing what the truth is yet. And then realizing that we will find the truth through feeling. You're not going to necessarily figure it out logically. You're going to try different things and see how they feel. You're going to try different things, and people are going to reject you, and they're not going to like you, and they're going to be upset with you, right? Like, I know a lot of spiritual teachers say, when you finally step into who and what you are and all these things, everyone's just going to love you, and you're going to find your community and all these things. No. What's actually going to happen is you're going to disturb the peace of how all of your current relationships function. A lot of people are going to get upset with you. They're going to reject you. They're going to resist you changing. And you're going to have to do it anyways. And see that you don't die. That's how we reprogram our nervous systems. Is we start to do things that contradict our conditioning through realizing the things that feel like shit, and then slowly doing other things and seeing that we don't die. seeing that we don't die, seeing that we can be rejected, that we can be abandoned, that people cannot meet our need. And that doesn't mean we're wrong or we're bad or we shouldn't have that need or that we're gonna die. That's how we start to untangle our program, is that we let ourselves get rejected. We let ourselves get abandoned. We let ourselves make people upset. And we see that we can still survive, that we can still get our needs met. That, and what Brandon says, what they really should be saying is that the people that matter will love you no matter what. And there will be times that you go through periods of time with friends and family and spouses and coworkers who really do love you and really do support you, who get upset with you changing the way that the dynamic is. But they're probably not going to leave. There are going to be people who resist you, who resist the change. And it's uncomfortable and weird for a while, but they will get on board. You see what I'm saying? It's not the end of the world when we get rejected. And we have to prove that to our nervous systems, like I say, first through building these tools of self-love. Being able to be on your own side, being willing to say if it feels like shit, if it's shame, and if it's guilt, it's not true. You start to investigate, you start to have compassion for yourself, you start to witness where your patterns came from. So instead of asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Blah, you start to really say, okay, where did this come from? Curiosity, right? So compassion first, there's nothing wrong with me. Now, this harmful behavior, this behavior that hurts, this pattern that I have, that I don't know why I'm doing this, I don't know why I am the way that I am. Well, where did I learn this? Curiosity. And then how might this not be true? Existential crisis. We really let ourselves feel. So again, this is right because it feels right. Okay, again, does it just feel familiar? Does it just feel like how you always feel? Do you have a bunch of stories to support it? But if you actually tune into your body, how does it feel? Your actual physical body. And then challenging the things that feel terrible, starting to go towards the things that feel good, and watching as it does disrupt your life. It does disrupt your relationships. You start to get more aware of what you want and what you need and how to validate yourself. It says that's why you don't fail. You learn as long as you're doing that and you celebrate yourself that you are okay. Exactly that. You can't fail if you are willing to just learn from everything you go through. And again, just because you get rejected or abandoned or told that your need is bad and wrong or people don't validate you, doesn't mean you did it wrong. In real reality, you can be doing the exact right thing and be getting abandoned and rejected and told that your need is wrong and bad and stupid. Just because consensus reality says something doesn't make it true. So we need to look at actual reality, not what people are reacting and responding to you as when you do what you do. Because your relationship with everyone else is not your relationship with your caregivers. You are now not stuck in a position where you don't have agency the way that you didn't have agency with your caregivers. People can be upset with you now, people can reject you now, people can pull away from you now, and you can still be okay. You can still figure out your needs. You can find other people. You can move on. You can put up boundaries. You can have people be upset with you, and it's okay. This is the thing that's different now. You now have agency. Okay? You now have agency that you didn't have before. Your relationship with others now is all about communication. What do you want? What do they need? What are we willing to do for each other? What are we willing to grow into? What are they showing me that I still reject? What am I showing them that they still reject? And is that really true? What do we actually feel? Right? Learning to understand that we can understand our own needs. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're completely independent now. It means we can ask to get our needs met. It means that if people say no, we can figure out a different way. It means that if people think something is bad and wrong and stupid about us, we can accept it and love it anyways. We have that power now because our relationship with other people is no longer our relationship with our caregivers. We have autonomy and the capacity to be self-aware and the capacity to change and grow and be okay when people don't like us. That's what's different. Okay? So this is what this path is. We start to become aware of how do things actually feel. Compassion for ourselves and curiosity, always first 2 steps. How do things actually feel? What's the reaction that people are having versus the actual results I get in reality? Because a lot of the time we're going to be shamed, blamed, and guilted for things that feel really good to us, that give us good results. And we're going to have to see, yeah, consensus reality says I got a bad result, but real reality shows me that I got a good result. And vice versa. I might get totally approved of and accepted and loved because of this thing, but it feels like shit to me. And then we have to learn that we can be our real selves a little bit more and more every day. Be rejected, be not liked, make people uncomfortable, and still be okay. And like, to varying degrees, when we might need help with this. It might be slow steps. We might still be in abusive or dominant relationships where we're not safe to be ourselves. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, and I'm not saying everyone can just step into their full selves right now and just everything is fine, and that it's all an illusion that you are scared of people. I'm not saying that. Because we do live in a world of imbalanced power. We do live in a world where some of us are in victim-victimizer relationships. We need to be self-aware again of what is the real reality. Like, how much can I get rejected? How much can I not fit in with how my partner wants me to be or my friends want me to be or whatever, and be okay? Can I get fired from this job and find a new job or no? Like, we do need to we're going to slowly work through this. And I'm not trying to minimize that there are situations where sometimes we are not safe to be ourselves. That is absolutely true, and that does happen. And we have to discern for ourselves if that's really truly where we're at or not. Because sometimes we're going to feel like we are in that situation and we aren't. That's why this is slow, 1 step at a time, no big rush. You're not going to just become your real self overnight. Compassion and curiosity first, always. And then realizing our relationships, the codependency we were taught is how relationships work, is not how adult relationships work. And we have to work our way out of it through learning, cooperation, understanding our own needs, consent. What are we willing to do? What are others willing to do? Learning to grow with people, and we're gonna have conflict, and we're gonna have compromise, and we're gonna have to figure things out, and it's gonna be messy sometimes, and that's okay. That we can be our true selves and not be liked and still be okay most of the time. Okay? So that's that. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them below and I will answer them when I can. And other than that, have a fantastic week. I will see you next week. And just remember, you have autonomy now. You can be rejected and still be okay. And everything about you is good. There is no bad part of you. Every part of you is just trying to keep you safe in the conditioning you were raised in. So if you can start to see yourself through that lens, everything else is going to become a lot more clear. Okay? Okay. Have a good week. I'll see you next week. Mwah.